Hi, welcome to Dreams Recycled podcast with me, your host, Tiffany Ann. I am excited today because we're going to talk about some things that are a little bit naughty. So if you're listening to this in the car with your children, you should probably turn it off. Today we are joined by a friend of mine, the lovely Steena Marie Brown. Hi, Steena.
Hi, Tiffany. Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, I have to tell you, I was a little bit suspect about whether I should ask you on or not. I love what you do, but it's such a common problem and issue and questions I get asked constantly by divorcees. If you've been in a very long-term marriage, you may not have had sex at all or very rarely, or hopefully you've only been having sex with your spouse. And so once we get out of our marriages and we start going back into the dating world, one of the things that is really terrifying is the thought of having sex with anyone new. And that's for a multitude of reasons. And so that's what we want to talk to you about. So how do you kind of empower yourself to get back in the saddle, so to speak?
I love this question. It's so juicy. I feel like there's so many different angles it could take to look at this, because I really think our sexuality is about, or how I define it, is who we are and how we relate to others. Mm-hmm. So, no matter where we are in our journeys and our relationships, it's coming back to ourselves and coming back to our pleasure and embodiment within, so that we can then bring that into a relationship. And when relationships are rocky, or we're going through, a divorce or a breakup or after, there's a sense of identity shift and this kind of sometimes disconnection or loss of like, who am I now? How do I go out there and connect with other people? And I think what it really comes back to is connecting with ourselves first, because we can't go into a relationship and expect the other person to magically know what we like. And
well, I was going to say, and that's a very good point, right? Because a lot of times when I speak to divorcees, one of the things they say is during their marriage, one of the issues was a dissatisfactory sex life, or a sex life that didn't match their needs or their wants or whatever. Or in fact, even being married to somebody who they never even felt comfortable discussing sexuality or sex with in any way. And so they've come out the other end, and not only do they, they're not confident in their body and themselves, but also they actually want to kind of reinvent their sex life. And I think that's true. A lot of us get married very, very young. A lot of us kind of the more passive role in the relationship and sexually, right, when we get married. And then by the time we're older and leave those marriages, we're almost different people anyway.
Yeah, that's so true.
So how would you advise people? How do we reconnect with our sexuality? How do we feel more confident in ourselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first thing, as you were talking, that comes up is looking at the shame that we have around even talking about it. So even talking about our vagina, talking about pleasure, talking about orgasm, and just being able to use those words without going back to like the middle school sex ed class where you're like the giggly little, girl that's like, oh, can we even talk about that? And allowing yourself to find spaces in your life where those topics are open. So, that's what, I've created in my tribe, is a space where we can talk about that. And I have friends and people come to me and they're like, I think the kind of person I'm supposed to talk to this about. And it's like, they don't know, people don't usually know like where to go to get that, but having that safe space where you can just say, this is something I'm struggling with, or I feel like numb from the waist down and what's going on there. When we can actually just acknowledge it, that to me is the first step. And saying, this is how it's been, but this isn't how it's going to be anymore. So, and healing that within yourself then allows you to move forward to create something different in a new relationship. Because something I hear from a lot of clients is like, well, he was a great husband, he was a great, dad, he's a great guy, but like there's just no chemistry. And they create this fantasy idea of this man who they could go find, who's just going to sweep them off their feet and throw them down on the bed and fuck them, and everything's going to be like hunky dory. And for me, it really took releasing the shame and then finding out what I actually like and what I actually want. Mm-hmm. And it goes beyond just like technique. So it's not just like, oh, this is the position, sexual position I like, or, you know, I like to be touched this way, but it's really on like that emotional and energetic level. Mm-hmm. And so some of that does mean self-pleasuring. Some of that means like taking time to actually touch our own bodies. And sometimes that's just a simple like massage after the shower. I have so many women who they become uncomfortable even just like massaging their arms and legs and, you know, inner thighs. We're like, whoa, like, am I really supposed to love myself that much? Is it really okay for me to enjoy my body?
Well, and it's difficult, isn't it? So after a broken relationship or divorce, I mean, we're all racked with, you know, most of us anyway, racked with self-doubt and insecurities and self-esteem issues, you know, which are kind of a byproduct of the divorce and the breakup of a marriage. You know, often we're in relationships with people who maybe have made us feel not so great about our bodies or our looks or whatever. I mean, being a woman, you go into a marriage usually with no children, and, you know, 2-3 children later. I mean, I know for me, one of my biggest things was like, good Lord, like I haven't had sex with anyone as a mother, right? Since I've had these children, since my body has changed, you know, no longer Victoria's Secret model kind of look anymore. And there's, you know, that kind of change on top of the fact that you're already insecure and you're worried about what other people think, and you're worried about if you've missed out on some kind of, you know, something everybody else knows and you didn't, like you didn't get the manual somehow. And it's nerve-wracking. And so, and I have a lot of men who contact me also, men and women, who struggle with this, you know, and then this leads into things like performance anxiety, you know, or maybe they even shut down, like you said, and they don't even want to have sex. They don't even want to have a relationship because they're so scared of being naked with somebody or having sex with the lights on or somebody seeing, you know, the cellulite on their thighs or whatever it is that people are hung up on. And it's such a shame because one of the things I discuss with them is, you know, it's part of the forgiveness and the self-love, right? After divorce, you really have to work on the whole person because sex is such a big part of your, or your psyche is such a big part of your sexual life that if you haven't healed your psyche, you're not going to be able to heal your sexual life. So, yes. So what would you say? So, and there is no right or wrong answer. So if our listeners are listening, there is no kind of one thing fits everyone, but Steena Marie is a sexual empowerment coach and we're excited to have her. And so I guess what I want to say is in specific terms, let's say you're struggling. Let's say you've been married for 20 years, you've come out of a relationship, you haven't had sex, maybe you haven't had sex for the last 5 years in your marriage, you meet someone and you were just petrified to have sex with them. Is it something you should be discussing with the person when you go on these, you know, once you get to that level? Is it something that you should kind of fess up to and work through together? Or should you just kind of rip off the Band-Aid and have sex anyway?
So in my experience, this is like totally in my body. It's like, I cannot force myself, you know, to just move beyond the emotion. It's like, if there's resistance there, if there's fear or constriction where it's like, I just don't even know what that's going to feel like. To me, the best approach is always to put it out there. And it's, you know, going into a relationship, if you're really wanting to build this relationship, like let's assume that you're dating with the intention of, I really want to build a new relationship and not just, you know, for fun.
Yeah, have fun. Yeah. Well, because there's a lot of that after divorce, lots of people having fun.
Right. And that's great. But I think that, you know, part of the fear is that when you really open up and are vulnerable and commit, that like, what if this turns out to be just like before, you know? And that can come up even if things are looking good. And so to actually be able to allow yourself the space to just say, I really would love to be intimate with you.
Right.
I really crave that, but it's been so long that it's like a rusty hinge, you know? It's like, it feels unfamiliar. It feels new. And, you know, admit that, like, that's exciting, right? It's exciting that this feels really new, but I'm also a little bit terrified. And I think,
and I think that's normal, right? It's normal to be afraid. It's normal to, I mean, I talk about in my book that I want to say having sex after divorce was even more petrifying than having sex for the first time ever. Because, you know, you have however many years of also other things going on in your head that have been planted that you're trying to kind of unravel.
Yeah. And, you know, when you have that communication, it's like you're also allowing that other person to honor you. So if you're sharing that with them and you're, you know, the person, the partner, the person you're dating, like, can't handle that, if they're just like, well, you just need to get over it.
Right.
Like, this is an area where,
it's a bit of a red flag, right?
Right. You can really see, how much is this person going to support me? Because this is, you know, you're going to need that emotional support in more areas than just having sex when you're building a relationship after having a divorce. So it's almost a little bit of like a litmus test, right? Like, is this person going to bring their full presence and just say, absolutely, like, we'll go slow, or if you want to go fast, or if you want to do this, like, let's just explore, like, let's just play and be present. That feels really nourishing, you know, to have somebody who understands, like, the nerves and the fears and is willing to handle that with care and with love, versus somebody who just kind of wants you to get over it or doesn't really understand.
Yeah, that would be another red flag. No, and I think that's true. You know, you can tell a lot from people from their reactions, and when you're honest with people and you show them vulnerability and they react heinously, then that's your red flag to leave, I think. One of the other things, obviously, that divorce has a massive high percentage of is infidelity in marriages. So we also deal with a lot of people who have been cheated on in their marriage. And they view this as a sexual inadequacy and an insecurity that they feel, you know, maybe if I was better in bed, they wouldn't have had sex with somebody else. And obviously we assure them from a psychological point of view that when people cheat, it's very, very rarely anything to do with sex, and very, very, well, never to do with the sexual performance of the person that they're married to. It's much more to do with the issues and insecurities that the person has who's cheating. So if you had a client that came to you and said, you know, I was in this marriage and my husband or my wife was a perpetual cheater, and now every time I have sex or think about sex, all I think about is I must not be very good, or I must not, you know, some kind of inadequacy. And then in men, this often leads to performance anxiety, like, thank God I'm not a man. That would be very frustrating, I'm sure. How do people get over that? How do people separate that it's not them, it was always their exes?
Yeah. So I have a couple of things to say on that. One, I wrote in my book about pornography addiction, which I feel like has a similar like emotional roller coaster, where it's, you know, my husband had experienced that addiction, and that's what it felt like to me when it would happen. It was like, what's he looking for that I don't have? And, you know, what is it that I'm missing and not giving him? And it's different than, like, I'm not giving a moral assessment on viewing pornography, but it's just the fact of, like, him feeling out of control, him just kind of default escaping to something. And I just felt like, what's wrong with me? And when I realized that our sexual relationship was one thing, and then his choices to view pornography, or someone's choices to cheat and, you know, go have sexual relations with other people it just doesn't have anything to do with you. It would be like saying, well, he's an alcoholic because I don't fuck him good enough. Like that wouldn't make sense either. Or he's a drug addict because I don't fuck him good enough. It's not, we wouldn't draw those connections. And so just because we're having sex and then they're having sex with someone else doesn't mean it's connected. And that's
right.
It's like, that's a huge leap for us to make, because there's so many messages in our culture that say like, we have to perform, we have to measure up, we have to like be sexy enough and be, you know, the Victoria's Secret model, like you said, to like keep his attention or to, you know, keep them faithful. And it's, for me, it was first realizing that, you know, our relationship wasn't going to fix that. Like I couldn't just perform better to, you know, get him to like stop what he was doing.
Well, right. And that's ridiculously true. I mean, we can't fix anybody else's. We can't make anyone be faithful to us. Right. Yeah. And I think it's a massive issue in marriages and in after, you know, marriages with a lot of infidelity, is we really have to let go of that's 100% on the person who's doing it and their issues that they have to work through, and not a reflection of, you know, what our body looks like or what we're like, or if we're sexy enough or the size of our whatever body parts I walk into. Right? And let that go. Totally.
And I think that, you know, then the next layer of that too is choosing to trust ourselves again. And, you know, you mentioned forgiveness, and I think there's always a level of self like hatred or like putting ourselves down, self-deprecation, where it's like, how could I have chosen a partner who would do that to me? And, you know, why did I get myself into this? And so there's a level of allowing ourselves to forgive ourselves and to, you know, allow ourselves to even forgive that person. That doesn't mean that we have to like be, you know, back in the relationship with them. Like forgiveness doesn't have requirements, but it's releasing ourselves from that, the bitterness and the unworthiness and the undeservingness. So we can say, you know, I deserve to create a relationship where the type of intimacy I want and the fidelity that I want is there, and I deserve that. And it's okay to want that. And, you know, I don't have to project this old stuff onto people. And
right. Or onto yourself, right?
Exactly.
Because, you know, self-love is just a massive hurdle to get over after divorce. And somebody the other day was saying, you know, they wanted to know if anyone would ever find them attractive again, because obviously they'd been in a relationship where they were made to feel ridiculously unattractive, you know, sexually and otherwise. And that kind of breaks my heart, because you go, how do you let one person affect your psyche to that point that you really don't see your attractiveness or your value or your self-worth or whatever it is? And you can't even imagine somebody else being attracted to you. It was, you know, it's heartbreaking on a very kind of personal level. And we were discussing how, you know, you really have to practice self-love. You have to practice it every day in every way. And until you get to a certain level, and when you get to a certain level, the irony is that that kind of projection of your own self, you feel unattractive, unworthy, that makes you not attract people, right? And it's self-fulfilling prophecy. So once you kind of and so once you kind of fix that in your psyche and you learn to self-love and you realize how worthy you are and how attractive you are, and that there are, you know, and then also realize that there are still good people out there who will be attracted to you when you're at your healthiest, best self, they start to fall at your feet. I mean, that's what happened to me. I was like, after my divorce, I was like, God, I don't know if anyone's ever going to find me attractive again. And then the more I kind of healed my own self-worth and self-confidence, the more people started to fall at my feet, right? That's what happens.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because, you know, when, you know, I work mostly with women, but then it's everything that I do with women, it like also involves men, you know, it's like by default, but it's like when a woman really drops into her presence, into her body, into her pelvic bowl and her vagina and her womb space, and like gets fully into that. And you're just like, holy shit, I am pretty fucking awesome, you know? And when we're like in the shower and feel the hot water on our bodies, like we can start with those little experiences to build up that self-love and just to enjoy ourselves. And I think that that's really what makes other people enjoy us. It's like when you think you're interesting, other people will find you interesting. Correct. When you think that you're attractive, other people will be attracted to you.
Right. And there is nothing as attractive as confidence, right? And happiness. Like if you appear to be happy and you appear to be confident, you are like a man or woman magnet. And simple as that. There's nothing as attractive as that. And that's really what we kind of teach people and tell people that they should be working on, especially right after divorce. I mean, if you want to go out, have fun, have sex with a bunch of people, that's entirely up to you. But mostly I think people after divorce should be working on kind of the self-love factor and feeling confident and feeling okay in themselves before they kind of even try and enter any kind of other full-time relationships or, you know, another extra additional whatever sexual or physical relationships or whatever with other people. Why don't you tell us about your book? Your book is called Worship Her. I love that title. So tell us a little bit about it.
So the subtitle is Resurrect Your Pleasure, Embody Your Sexual Power, and Live Unapologetically for You. And I think that sums up the book pretty good. I wrote this book just, you know, I have a lot of like personal stories in there and stories of how I've transformed and grown into my sexual power. And, you know, we haven't mentioned that I got married when I was 3 days past my 19th birthday. So I was very young when I got married.
You baby.
Yeah. I look back at the pictures now. I'm like, damn, now I understand why it was like, you know, a kind of a shocking thing to get married when you're 19. I just always felt like I was older than I was anyways. But I met my husband in high school and it was like, okay, what are we waiting for? You know, we're going to get married anyways. And so we got married, and then I had my first child at 21 and my second a couple of years later. So it's really been an intense journey. And, you know, the transitions like through motherhood and diving into how do I create a marriage? Like there's, you know, you mentioned like, where's the manual? Where's the handbook? And there isn't one. And so there's all of these places where you have this trial and error. And I really think that being married is a choice every day. And so, you know, you get to choose to create that relationship every day. Right. And so when a relationship ends, it's like we find ourselves asking those same kind of like reinvention questions. And a lot of what I cover in the book is, you know, what are those beliefs and things that are keeping us in shame and keeping us from showing up? So a lot of times, like, we're just afraid to be attractive. Like, what would it mean if I started to receive attention, especially when we've been in a monogamous relationship? And for the most part, our culture kind of says, like, if you're in a monogamous relationship, then, you know, you shouldn't be receiving attention from anyone else. And, you know, you shouldn't feel too attractive. You shouldn't be too, you know, too out there, too bold.
Too sassy.
Yeah. So, you know, finding that part of ourselves that I think that we all feel at some point, like in childhood, even, where, you know, I watch my 4-year-old daughter and she is just performing every minute of her life. It's like, you know, she'll dance ballet for anyone. And she, you know, dresses herself up every day, like crown, jewelry, you know, teeth, like the works. And I think that we tend to lose that like freedom and that joy. And so we get the opportunity to then reclaim that and to look at, you know, where am I holding on to the unworthiness and the shame? And where am I not really speaking my truth? Where do I need to learn to say no so that I'm not just a doormat? Like, that's another thing going into a new relationship. It's like, knowing how to hold your boundaries and respect yourself and, you know, create that relationship from a place of empowerment and not just kind of obliging to someone else's needs because you want to be liked or because you want them to, you know.
Right. Yeah. It's a difference between, yeah, it's kind of a fine line too, isn't it? I mean, I think what you said about your daughter is interesting. As an adult, it's always walking that fine line between wanting unanimous attention, healthy attention, and unhealthy attention. And whether, you know, that manifests in sexual terms or in emotional terms. But I think it's something a lot of people struggle with, that fine line. You want to be attractive and confident and attract other people to you in a healthy way, but you don't want to give so much of yourself away to everyone that there's nothing left for you, or that it becomes inappropriate for you and your spouse in that situation. And I think it is. I think it's as an adult, it's a hard lesson to kind of figure out the parameters of that. And I'm sure you know, and I know, and you look around you, you know, there are people who clearly cannot have enough attention and they don't care if it's healthy or unhealthy. And then there are people who are so petrified of any kind of positive attention, they kind of, you know, kind of go into the wallflower mode and really, really uncomfortable with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to me, it's, you know, when you come back to yourself, I had an experience I guess it was still this year. I can't even keep track with the seasons change. I'm like, it's last year. But I had an experience where I was sitting at Starbucks and was sharing a table with somebody. And I wrote about this in my book a little bit. It was like, I was just engaging in a friendly conversation. And that's just what I do. I love talking to people. And all of a sudden, like, the conversation turned and he's asking me out for a drink. And I'm like, what the heck is happening here? And, you know, having been married, like, I got married before I was even of drinking age. So it wasn't like I was going out to bars and getting asked out. So I was just like, this guy knows I'm married and he definitely wants to take me out for a drink. And, you know, being like the innocent Midwestern girl, I'm thinking, we're at Starbucks. Why do we need to go anywhere else? Like, have a coffee, you know? But it was really interesting because it really shone a light for me on what other people pick up on. Like, when we're just being ourselves, when we fully show up, when we own it, when we love ourselves, and then we show up with that, it's not our responsibility if someone else is, you know, getting the wrong message. It's like, if we're really in integrity with ourselves, then we can just say, no, thank you, you know, passing on that and moving along. And I think we can get.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, because it's the same parameter. We can't control other people's behaviors, or we can control as our own. And obviously we know from the ridiculously high, I just read yesterday actually that they think statistically 70% of women and 74% of men have cheated at least one time in any marriage that's over 10 years, which is, wow. I don't know where that, I mean, who knows, stats and lies, right? They're very similar, but I mean, that's ridiculously high. But you can see how it happens. Like you said, you were innocently sitting in Starbucks, but it's because we have to kind of police ourselves because we can't police everyone else, because a lot of people out there don't respect marriage or monogamy, and that's up to them. But you have to, you know, act accordingly your end.
Yeah. And it's also, you know, it wasn't his responsibility to like uphold my commitment. So correct. Just because he's like hitting on me, which I didn't realize until he was actually asking me out for the drink, which is funny because I looked back at the conversation. I was like, oh yeah, you said that. That was probably a clue. Oh yeah. Like, well, you're naive for my own good. But, you know, when that conversation happened and like, I said no. And then he found me like on Facebook and was just like, I really want, you know, I'm going to be in town for another day. Like, can't we get a drink? And I was like, no. I was like, dude, I'm not available. And, you know, I'm choosing to create this kind of relationship with my husband. That's the deal, you know? Right. And that's my responsibility to hold that. And that's my responsibility to communicate that. Mm-hmm. And it's not like I was blaming and just being like, no, I'm married. No, I'm married. No, I'm married. It was like, this is me. This is where I'm committed. And it really felt like a deep reverence for myself and for my marriage, because I told my husband about the whole darn thing. He was privy to everything, and he's just like laughing because he knows nothing's going to happen. Like,
Right.
but I think, when you're going out there and like wanting other people to affirm you, you don't have that.
That was the cat just knocked off something.
If you don't have that self-worth within yourself and you're looking for other people to validate it, it would be really easy to say yes to that offer, right? It would have been really easy for me to say, oh yeah, it's just a drink. Let's just go have a drink. And because I would have wanted him to make me feel beautiful and to make me feel worthy. And to be able to own that, it's like, then we become really empowered in the relationships we want to choose, whether it's, denying the drink, or if you're actually out dating, it's like being in that power so that you can say, I enjoy this person. I would love to spend more time with them, which feels different than I hope they like me and what do they think of me, and all of the other questions.
And am I going to be good enough? And am I going to be sexy enough? And am I going to be whatever? Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it all goes back to self-love and having self-respect for yourself, right? If we're all healthy and whole as individuals, then, it doesn't matter who comes in and out of your life on the external, you're still going to be okay. You're still going to be whole. You're not validated or holding on to this kind of need for attention from all these other people who quite often are unhealthy. I mean, I think when people hit on married people and they know they're married, that tells you kind of everything you need to know about that person in that one question. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is somebody that I was thinking we could have had a really pleasant conversation and connected, and I'm not opposed to like having a male friend. So it's like he didn't make any effort to actually build trust or build a friendship. And it totally tells you everything about that person, that wow, you weren't really connecting with me just as a person. Right. You're just kind of feeding off of the fact that I'm really confident. And I think that it's, like you said, that insecurity that the other person has, like they're looking for, like, will you help me to satisfy that insecurity? So I was talking to a man who was divorced. We were talking about, his dating relationship, and he was like, I'm just so nervous because, like, does she like me? And, are we going to have sex? This is our third date, and all this stuff. And I was like, the nerves are really about, is she going to like me? And I said, so if she doesn't, then that doesn't mean anything about you.
Right.
Like, if someone doesn't find you attractive, that doesn't mean you're not attractive. If someone doesn't want to take you out on a date, it doesn't mean you're not desirable. Like,
exactly.
One person.
And that's a massively important thing you just said. I mean, we really have to get over that. Just because we're not right for somebody, that doesn't mean we're not right for anybody. And and I always say, people do you a favor. People do you a really, really big favor when they recognize, even before you do, that you and them are not a match. Because right there, that's everything you need to know. If they don't feel you're a match, then 100% they're not also a match for you. And you can, go back into the dating world and find somebody who is, right? And that's a good thing. It's definitely better than finding out after you've married them that they're not a good match. And that's a good thing. And we're gonna kind of come to an end in a minute, but I just want to touch on something that you kind of brought up. We talk to a lot of people who are obsessed with stalking their exes, right? And especially if it's, their ex has moved on too quick, their ex has moved on with somebody that they think they were having an affair with, they catch their at the time spouse having an affair, and now they're getting divorced, and they're just obsessed with looking at the people's Instagram and Facebook and et cetera, et cetera. And you touched on it that, the person you're married to is the person you have a contract with. That's the person who you made a vow to. Whoever these additional people are, it's a complete waste of energy, time, and effort to be stalking them and channeling all that negativity and that hatred and vengeance and doing all this crazy stuff that people confess to me every day that they're doing. And obviously it's a energy wasted when they could be spending it on themselves. They could be spending it on trying to, you know, salvage any kind of relationship with their ex or soon to be ex for the sake of their children, you know, whoever these people are. As we said, you know, you just said and I said, they've showed you everything you need to know about them. You don't need to know anything about them. They've been having a relationship with somebody they knew they were married. So I say put them in the screw that bucket and carry on, right? Because it's all about you now.
Yeah, I totally agree that, you know, anytime we're putting that much energy into something that's about fear and that's just creating more anxiety, I think one thing we have to look at is like, how do I like secretly think this is benefiting me? Like, do I actually think that this is going to make them feel worse about what they're doing? Or like, you know, like what is the kind of delusion that we're feeding ourselves about why I need to keep doing this? Like, what are we expecting to happen? What are we trying to prove about that person? And how can we let that go so that, like you said, we can reinvest that energy somewhere that's actually going to bring us pleasure and happiness?
Well, and you're just doing more psychological damage to yourself, obsessing about the new partner or the new wife or the new husband or the new whoever or the person they had an affair with. I mean, that's all to me just a complete waste of energy that you should be spending on yourself and figuring out what you want in the life that you're going to build. And But anyway, Steena, it's been lovely to have you. We are running out of time. So tell us where our listeners can buy your book and where people can find you. And I'll also link it in the information on iTunes.
Yeah, sure. So the book is available on Amazon. Again, the title is Worship Her, and you can also find it under my name, Steena Marie Brown. And when this podcast goes live, I will also have 2 chapters that I would love to give to anybody who's listening. And they can grab that at steenamarie.com/free chapters. And that'll be the first 2 chapters of the book. You can get your hands on that. So
yay. Well, I'm definitely going to go get my hands on that. I can't wait to read your book. And thank you so much for coming on our show. And look for Steena Marie. Hopefully we'll see more of her in upcoming episodes. But thank you very much, Steena.
Thank you so much, Tiffany.